May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked in. On May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into a courthouse in Los Angeles, California.
Ricordiamoci che Aquaman è uscito un bel po' di tempo fa, The Batman ha già fatto 700 milioni ed è uscito da pochi mesi, con lo streaming supererà sicuro rincassi. Grazie ragazzi, perché veramente Globo ha anche molti più soldi di Enel forse, no, ho detto una minchiata, Enel pagami.
To get a no-notice ex-party restraint on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into a courthouse in Los Angeles, California to get a no-notice ex-party restraining order against Mr. Depp, and in doing so, ruined his life by falsely telling the world that she was a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp. Today, on May 27th, 2022, exactly 6 years later, we ask you to give Mr. Depp his life back by telling the world that Mr. Depp is not the abuser Ms. Heard said he is, and hold Ms. Heard accountable for her lies. Now it's time for you, the jury, to come to a decision. You have been entrusted with a serious task. What is at stake in this trial is a man's good name. Even more than that, what is at stake at this trial is a man's life. The life that he lost when he was accused of a heinous crime, and the life he could live when he was finally vindicated. Exactly 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court and filed a false report of domestic abuse against her husband of 15 months, Johnny Depp. The scene was a setup.
Pazzesco. Ti sposi e dopo 1 anno e mezzo in tribunale contro tuo marito. Che cazzo.
She tipped off the paparazzi so they would be waiting. They knew exactly where she would pause, which side of her face to photograph. And the photos captured what she wanted them to see, the image of a battered woman. What the paparazzi did not know is that the dark mark on her face mysteriously appeared 6 days after last seeing Mr. Depp. It was a lie. She knew it, Mr. Depp knew it, and the multiple witnesses you heard from who saw her that week of May 21st, 2016, also knew it. But the world only saw what she wanted them to see. 2 years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career until this trial, Ms. Heard presented
Grazie mille, un attimo.
herself to the world as a public figure representing domestic abuse. The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence, even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers love to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to. She inserted
Grazie
2
Mario.
years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse, and they would once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp. And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. The evidence presented at this trial has shown that Ms. Heard is in fact the abuser, and Mr. Depp the abused. As you heard from Mr. Depp and multiple other witnesses that testified under oath at this trial, Mr. Depp experienced persistent verbal, physical, and emotional abuse by Ms. Heard during their relationship. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him, including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely injuring his finger, and then put a cigarette out on his face.
Lotta e giuramento, sì. Minchia se la guarda il culo, ma poi quale culo?
You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will, just a month after getting married. You also heard from Tara Roberts, a manager at Mr. Depp's island, who witnessed Ms. Heard telling Mr. Depp that he was washed up and would die fat and lonely.
Marco, sai che con questo sguardo mi ecciti? Mario, con quei beats tu mi ecciti i portafogli.
You also heard from Miss Roberts that she witnessed Miss Heard clawing and grabbing at Mr. Depp, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back to her, and Mr. Depp had a visible injury to his nose on that occasion. Most importantly, you heard from Miss Heard yourselves on multiple audio recordings admitting to being physically violent with Mr. Depp. What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties, is Mr. Depp ever
No,
admitting
Tony.
to hitting, punching, or kicking Miss Heard. You didn't hear it. It doesn't exist.
Che bellina con gli
It
occhiali.
didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Miss Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia and the Bahamas,
Gli occhiali non ti rendono meno stronzo. Forse un po' sì. Che bene sempre, Ave Pinguz, tu sei un cazzo allupato.
you never heard Miss Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault.
Pinguz, ma quindi diventi ubriacatura oggi? Domani puoi aiutarmi, no? No?
Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol, Ms. Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong. But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings. As much as Ms. Heard and her lawyers have tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Ms. Heard that repeatedly admits to violence.
Explore Mode On, Zalando Privé. Ogni giorno i brand che ami fino al 75% di sconto.
Grazie. Grazie ragazzi.
When you catch Ms. Heard in a lie, she tries to
Penso di meritare... Quant'è? Quant'è? Mezzanotte, 2300 persone. Mi devono pagare. Pagatemi. Zalando paga Marco. Mia madre comprava da Zalando. Cazzo. È una vita che la famiglia Merrino li aiuta.
cover it up with more lies. So let's talk about the giant lie at the heart of this case. Ms. Heard's claim that Mr. Depp is an abusive monster and that she is a public figure representing domestic abuse. She spun a story of shocking, overwhelming, brutal abuse. She came into this courtroom prepared to give the performance of her life, and she gave it.
Zalando versus Merrino.
Ms. Heard's acting coach, Christina Sexton, testified that Ms. Heard has difficulty
Sexton.
crying when she is acting. You saw it. Ms. Heard sobbing without tears, while spinning elaborate, exaggerated, fantastical accounts of abuse.
È un po' la voce di tutti noi, la Vasquez, per ora, perché ha molto parlato di quello che è accaduto in aula, delle storie dette, eccetera, che comunque ha un valore, mentre invece quelli di prima hanno parlato molto di quello che è successo al tempo, che è pure un valore, però secondo me dovrebbero anche un po' loro impegnarsi su quello che è successo in passato, visto che è diffamazione quello di cui stanno denunciando Amber, quindi devono far capire che è stato e come.
And everything going on in her mind almost a decade prior while enduring that abuse. It was a performance. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it.
Beh, non saprei.
Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Ms. Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Ms. Heard got up on that stand in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse.
Ah, ok. Ok, intendevo in questo senso qua.
Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely anything. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Aaron Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colber, Morgan Knight,
Dottor Kirby,
Morgan Tremaine,
Dottor Kirby,
Officers Melissa Sines,
Dottor Kirby. Ronitz, grazie per l'abbonamento. Dovete? Con cui si posso aiutarti? Veramente, Pinguz? Veramente? Però mandami un messaggio. Se è vero, mandami un messaggio e spiegami. Grazie, grazie, grazie.
Officer
Dottor Jacobi, wow.
Tyler Haddon, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly
Dottor
Knight.
Strange. Dottor
What
Wario.
Mr. testified
Dottor
to in this
Wario.
courtroom
Non l'avrei mai
is the
detto.
story of far too many women. But the overwhelming evidence and weight of that evidence shows that it is not her story. It's not Miss Heard's story. It was an act of profound cruelty, not just to Mr. Depp, but to true survivors of domestic abuse. For Miss Heard to hold herself out as a public figure representing domestic abuse. It was false, it was defamatory, and it caused irreparable harm. And to talk more about that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and my friend, Mr. Chu.
As Ms. Vasquez said, you have now come to know the real Amber Heard. Scary. We also told you at the start of this trial that you were going to come to know the real Johnny Depp, not the many characters you've seen him play so wonderfully in the movies, but the man himself.
Che ridi, mamma?
We kept that promise. You've met the real Johnny Depp. Before Amber Heard, ladies and gentlemen, no woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raised a hand to her in his 58 years.
Questo è importante.
And no other woman since.
È importante perché di solito se lo lasciano scappare gli altri che sono stati denunciati di sexual assault o robe così.
Ms. Heard made that false claim back on May 27th, 2016,
Non dicete di non ridere in aula, già.
and repeated it in her December
O anche solo sorridere.
2018 op-ed. Has any woman come forward since? This is Me Too without any Me Too. To the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, you heard Kate Moss 2 days ago testify. This is a woman who has never testified in any proceeding, ever.
Wow.
A very private person.
Wow.
Test-
Nico War e Leroy. Benvenuti tra i manipolati, cazzo. Insieme vi siete messi d'accordo? O è solamente l'amore che sta parlando e che quindi ci unisce? Un bacino per voi. Mua per Nico War e mua per Leroy. E mua per Amber Heard perché secondo me non ne riceverà uno nei prossimi 20 anni, se non da Pinguz.
Testified that Mr. Depp never abused her and that Ms. Heard lied to you. And she lied to you twice. Beyond the personal and emotional effects of Ms. Heard's lies, their impact on Mr. Depp and his family, the damage she inflicted on his reputation and career is
Leroy!
There's an old saying that a good reputation takes a lifetime to build,
Simp Inguz.
but only a second to destroy.
Simp Inguz.
Mr. Depp spent, in fact, a lifetime building his reputation as one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation, an iconic figure respected and liked throughout Hollywood, and
Leroy.
recognized and admired throughout the world. This is heard in this case.
Chaz, grazie mille per l'abbonamento. Grazie.
Amber Heard is not a true victim, and Mr. Depp certainly is not an abuser. Again, nobody has come out of the woodwork to say Me Too. This is the unique and singular Me Too case where there's not a single Me Too. While Mr. Depp's name will be forever tarnished by these horrendous and false allegations, this case is about telling you his story and the truth about what really happened, which you've now heard. It is about restoring his lost reputation. It's about showing Mr. Depp's children, Lily Rose and Jack, that the truth is worth fighting for.
Cazzo.
It is. And it's about restoring Mr. Depp's name and standing in the community to the fullest extent that you can. And you can do something. And only you, ladies and gentlemen, can do that for him. You heard from Mr. Depp yesterday that he has been carrying these outlandish, outrageous stories on his back, pretty stoically, and living them with them for 6 years, and waiting to be able to bring his truth out. And he has told you the truth, the unvarnished truth, even truth that pretty embarrassing. He knew that was going to happen when he brought this case. You've seen the evidence in this case over 6 long weeks, which we again thank you for.
Mamma mia.
That evidence shows overwhelmingly that Ms. Heard's attempt to paint herself as a heroic survivor, an innocent survivor, and Mr. Depp as a terrifying abuser are utterly false. We ask you to please return your verdict for Mr. Depp. We ask you, we implore you to give him his name, his reputation, and his career back. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Colpo in culo, veramente. Potente sta roba, ragazzi. Pazzesco che siamo arrivati in questo momento. Troppo importante anche che stia accadendo questa roba qua. Per quanto bimbesco e stupido possa sembrare in alcuni momenti, e lo è sembrato tanto. E ci siamo veramente divertiti. Ce l'ho scelto come content principalmente perché Amber non ci sta con la faccia, figuriamoci con quello che c'è dentro. Però quante cose abbiamo imparato e quante cose sono successe. Da pazzi, è stato un bel viaggio. Sì. Puoi fare un piccolo riassunto? Non ho capito tutto. La difesa di Amber l'ha buttata moltissimo sul fatto che effettivamente non si trattava di diffamazione visto che era vero. E anche quando lei ha ritwittato il post non l'ha ritwittato tutto, ma non l'ho capito. Però si sono molto fissati sul fatto che comunque sia, se anche una volta sola avesse abusato di lei Johnny, non è diffamazione, perché vuol dire che è vero. Secondo me può essere che vince lei e giocano molto su questa roba qua. Sarebbe anche un buon gioco, sarebbe vero, perché ricordiamolo, sono in tribunale perché Johnny l'ha denunciata per diffamazione e vuole da lei 50 milioni. Perciò lei può essere anche una che abusa, ma se non è stata abusata, può essere una che abusa, ma se lei è stata abusata, comunque quella non è diffamazione. Penso che potremmo benissimo entrare in quella linea temporale. Daria, grazie per i 2 mesi. Gianni Depp, che ha regalato una sub a Amber Heard. Giustissimo. Sì, ma lei è presentata come abusata con l'occhio nero, loro coinvolgono abusi non solo fisici ma anche psicologici, la cosa non mi pare troppo sensata. Beh, da che mondo è mondo, gli abusi psicologici sono anche degli abusi, certo. Sono peggio quelli fisici, la gente dice dipende, no. L'ho spiegato un miliardo di volte, anche perché io li ho ottenuti quelli fisici. Quelli fisici sono sia fisici che psicologici, non fa solo male alla guancia quando ti danno uno schiaffo, fa male al cuore. Tra parentesi, alla guancia se ne va dopo un giorno, forse un'ora. Al cuore rimane per sempre. Ed è vero. Sono in realtà d'accordo sulla roba. Un abuso psicologico è un abuso. E se lei avesse abusato di lui e lui si fosse autodifeso, sarebbe abuso da parte di lui? No. O comunque, in realtà è per questo che fanno il trial. Cioè, è durato 6 settimane, ragazzi. Chissà che cazzo di incubo deve essere stato per loro. Noi guardiamo tutte le cazzo di clip e loro non sono mai addormentati, sono sempre on point. Mamma mia, che cosa deve essere? Un grande fratello ma peggio. Invece di vincere soldi li perdi, da una parte. Marco, ma è meglio eBay o Instant Gaming? Sono diversi. È meglio eBay di Amazon ed è meglio Instant Gaming di tutto il resto. Mancano le due di posizioni finali, 6 e 20 minuti, le due di posizioni finali. Quale, Ulias? Quali? Erano queste quelle finali. 6 e 20 minuti. Di cosa stai parlando? Amazon ti paga, Marco. Twitch mi paga. Che utilizza il servizio Amazon, ma non mi paga Amazon. Finiamo con un dolcino? 22 secondi. Vediamo.
Thank the attorneys and litigants for the kindness and the great demeanor you've shown to my staff and to the courthouse staff and to the deputies and the sheriff.
Che non vedo un cazzo? Oh.
Thank the attorneys and litigants for the kindness and the great demeanor you've shown to my staff and to the courthouse staff and to the deputies and the sheriff.
Ah, l'ho visto.
I really appreciate it. It means a great deal to me. Okay, and I also appreciate Judy because she's a rock star. Okay, so yes. Well, that.
Tutti applaudono e lei no.
Well, yes. Well, that. Well, that.
Perché sta male. Ed è giusto così. Se devi fare un act lo fai fino alla fine, sono d'accordo. Però boh.